Venus is the planet of love, that mysterious force that causes one human being to become convinced that another human being is considerably more interesting than they actually are. Symptoms include loss of appetite, watching films we've got absolutely no interest in, and describing a grown adult as my snuggle bum. Venus has inspired poetry, music, great works of art, and every regrettable text message sent after midnight. Of all the planetary forces known to operate in the universe, few have caused quite as much unnecessary paperwork. Marriage certificates, divorce papers, restraining orders, all part of the fun. For thousands of years, humanity has tried to work out why love makes us behave like complete idiots. Poets blamed the heart, scientists blamed hormones, psychologists blamed it on our parents. Astrologers took a rather more straightforward approach. They looked up at the brightest planet in the night sky and said, yes, it's definitely her fault. Welcome back to Kippy's Quest, where each video is another step on our journey of understanding the occult. This week we're talking about Venus, goddess of love, beauty and poor judgment.
People only call it poor judgment when they're not invited.
And really that's the problem with Venus. We tend to reduce her to romance, hearts and fancying someone, when she's actually responsible for a much wider range of bad decisions. Venus is the part of the chart that says, I like that. That person, that haircut, that pair of shoes, that completely unnecessary ornament that you've somehow convinced yourself will transform the room. She tells us what we're drawn towards, what gives us pleasure, and which red flags would look considerably better in soft lighting.
Life is short. Buy the expensive perfume.
And once you start following Venus through astrology, mythology and the occult, she turns out to be far more interesting than just the planet of love. She's desire, attraction, beauty, pleasure, and the reason that OnlyFans exists. So today we're going to find out who Venus really is, why she keeps turning up whenever humans want things, and what she can tell us about the particular flavour of nonsense we find completely irresistible. But first, our fool is about to forget what he came in for.
The Fool's Odyssey. The Fool is still meandering his way around the planets in a cosmic death trap.
I think I can hear singing.
Yeah, we're just coming up to Venus. Try not to fall in love, and don't forget why we're here. Soon the bus pulls up outside a cabaret room, smelling of perfume and poor decisions.
Are you coming with me?
No thanks. Last time I got engaged to a chandelier.
And I've seen your face 1,000 times, but I feel like I just saw you for the very first time.
The Fool steps inside, where a glamorous lady is singing on a stage, her voice drifting through the room like silk over candlelight. Good Lord.
Well, well, look what the bus dragged in.
Hello?
Aren't you sweet? Come closer, darling. I don't bite, unless you ask nicely. So, what brings you to this place?
Oh, right, yeah. I can't remember.
Relax, darling. You're as stiff as a board.
What? No, it's just the way my trousers hang. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous.
Good. That means you're paying attention.
I just need a minute to compose myself.
Take all the time you need. I do appreciate a good build-up.
Right. I'm sure I came here for something.
A lot of men do.
No, I didn't mean that.
Why don't you have a little drinky, and you can tell me all about it?
Venus hands the Fool a glass of wine, and before you know it, he's chatting away without a care in the world.
Then there was this flash of lightning, and his hair was on fire. Wait a minute, I think I remember something about a bus.
Never mind that. Let's have a dance.
Venus leads the Fool onto the dance floor. Soon he's forgotten all about buses, trains, planets and passes.
That was really lovely.
Of course it was. That's rather the point.
Wait, point. There was a point. I had a point.
I know. I could see it from across the room.
No, I really did come here for something.
Then perhaps one more song will help you remember.
One more song?
Just one. A slow one. The sort of song that makes a man forget his troubles.
No. No, thank you.
No.
Yes. I would like to very much. But if I stay for one more song, I'll stay for another drink, and then another dance, and then I'll never remember what I'm supposed to be doing.
There you are, darling.
Where?
Back in yourself. Desire is a beautiful thing. Music, wine, dancing, a little flutter in the trousers. None of that is wrong. But if you chase every lovely thing that you desire, you'll spend your life being led around by your nose, and occasionally by your other bits.
So, pleasure isn't bad?
Of course not, as long as you're in control. The lesson of Venus isn't to run away from desire, it's to meet it with your eyes open. Pleasure is wonderful, but too much and you start to lose yourself to it. Sometimes you just have to pass.
That's it, pass. Will you stamp my bus pass, please?
Of course, darling. Let me get my hands on your possession.
Is that lipstick?
Why, yes. Sometimes it's fun to use your mouth. Now remember to enjoy what is beautiful without becoming a fool for it.
Thank you. I'll try my best.
The fool makes his way back to the clapped-out coach. Hey up, lover boy. Did you get your mark?
Yeah, she kissed it.
Sounds about right. Come on then, before you start writing poetry. And so, with his bus pass kissed and his trousers finally behaving themselves, the fool gets back on board the solar system circular. The music fades, the perfume slowly clears, and the bus rattles onward towards its next stop. To be continued. The history of Venus.
2,000 years ago, the Roman astrologer Marcus Manilius was already describing Venus as a force mankind willingly obeyed. He said, "This Venus graceth, here she seats her throne, and in the world's high face erects her own. That face whose awful force mankind admires, and yields obedience to her pleasing fires." Bearing in mind that awful meant awe-inspiring back then, he wasn't leaving her a one-star review at the massage parlour. But the interesting bit is pleasing fires. Venus doesn't force anybody to do anything, she makes you want to do it. And considering the number of wars, divorces, bankruptcies and regrettable tattoos caused by people wanting things, that may actually make her much more dangerous. Claudius Ptolemy meanwhile classified Venus as feminine, for reasons that have aged like milk. He said the moon and Venus are therefore said to be feminine, since their qualities are principally moist. Yeah, I think I'm just going to leave that one. Moving swiftly on, and because Renaissance magicians apparently couldn't experience a planet without turning it into a Sudoku, Venus also gets a magic square. Hers is 7 by 7, and as usual, hiding inside all this arithmetic are the names and sigils of the entities associated with the planet. Presiding over all this is Anael, the angel of Venus, representing the nicer Venusian qualities: love, harmony, beauty and attraction. And before anyone starts, it's pronounced Anael. There's absolutely no mention of any backdoor shenanigans. Then we have Hagiel, the intelligence of Venus. Yes, even cosmic desire requires middle management. The intelligence represents the conscious expression of the planet's power. So with Hagiel, all that raw Venusian desire gets pointed towards something useful. Creativity in bringing people together. Attraction with some idea of what it's doing. And finally there's Kedemel, the spirit of Venus. She's the rawer, more instinctive end of the spectrum. Less, I appreciate your inner beauty, and more, I have made an absolutely catastrophic decision, and I regret nothing. Also, Kedemel apparently governs panthers, goats, parrots, small cattle and dolphins. So if you're wondering who looks after the Venusian zoo, I'd say we've found her.
The mythology of Venus.
Long before she was lounging around naked on a seashell, Venus was already causing trouble in Mesopotamia. The Babylonians knew her as Ishtar, goddess of love, sex, fertility, and of course war, because nothing says romance like a good military conquest. In one of her most famous myths, she marched into the underworld, passing through 7 gates and surrendering part of her clothing and power at each one, until she arrived completely naked. At which point she was killed. The good news is that she was revived and told that she could leave. The bad news is that someone had to take her place. When she got back home, she didn't exactly find the grieving, broken-hearted husband she expected. He was just kinda sat on his throne looking rather pleased with the situation. So she sent him. And just like that, Goddess of Love and War starts to make a lot more sense. By the time we get to ancient Greece, Ishtar has become Aphrodite, although the Greeks gave her one of the most spectacular origin stories in mythology. According to one legend, Kronos castrated his father Uranus and threw his severed genitals into the sea. Foam gathered around them, and from that foam emerged the goddess of love and beauty. So next time someone tells you romance is dead, remember that it all started with a severed cock floating in the Mediterranean. When the Romans got hold of Aphrodite, she became Venus, and for once they didn't dramatically improve the amount of shagging in the story. Instead, they actually made her more respectable. Because being descended from ordinary rich people wasn't impressive enough, Julius Caesar claimed to be descended from Venus herself. He even dedicated a temple to Venus the Ancestress, turning the goddess of love and desire into the divine mother of his family, and by extension, Rome itself. So in the space of a few thousand years, she's gone from the goddess of sex and war to emerging from a severed Johnson to having her own respectable branch on the family tree. Now that's progress. However, there's one other name attached to the planet that we haven't dealt with yet. As the morning star, Venus was also known as Lucifer. We're going to come back to that later when we look at Venus in the sky.
The psychology of Venus.
Carl Jung takes us down the relationship route for this planet, showing the contrast between Venus and Mars. Quoting an alchemical text, he says, "The father of this child is Mars. He is the fiery life. His mother is Venus, who is the gentle love fire. Here then you see male and female, man and wife, bride and bridegroom." When we looked at Mars, Jung gave us aggression and the instinct to assert ourselves. But apparently Jung wasn't finished with him, because now he's sent the poor bastard to relationship counselling. But this does show that to Jung, Venus isn't just about romantic love. Psychologically, she's the thing that draws one thing toward another. She creates relationships. Mars says, "I am this, I want to act." Venus says, "I am drawn to this, I want to connect." He goes on to say, "You must see to it that they lie together in the bed of their union and live in sweet harmony. Then the virgin Venus will bring forth her pearl to soften the fiery spirit of Mars, and the wrathful fire of Mars will sink quite willingly in mildness and love into the love fire of Venus." This is the alchemical conjunction, the marriage of opposites. Mars is the fiery assertive force that separates and acts. Venus is the force that attracts, connects and brings things into relationship. And importantly, Jung isn't just saying Venus should put Mars's fire out. She gives it something to love. The text actually calls Venus a love fire. Desire has its own energy. The aim is for the two fires to meet without either destroying the other.
Venus in the chart.
So what happens when we actually get Venus in your birth chart? Well, if Mars describes the part of you that goes out and gets what it wants, Venus tells us what makes you want it in the first place. And that doesn't just mean romance. Venus can show up in your taste, your relationships, your attitude toward pleasure, the things you spend money on, and your completely objective conviction that everyone else's curtains are absolutely horrible. As always, the sign tells us how Venus expresses itself, while the house tells us where it's most likely to show up in life. Now, if you've been following the series, you'll know that I usually put a couple of examples in this section, and then put out a separate video for all 12 signs and houses. Unfortunately, those extra videos have turned out to be about as popular as a trip to the GU clinic. However, the Capricorn in me won't allow me to stop halfway through the series, so from now on you'll find all 12 signs and houses at the end of the main video. Anyway, getting back to the essential dignities, Venus, being a bit of a social butterfly, is at home in two signs, Taurus and Libra, and between them they show us two different sides of what she does. In Taurus, Venus gets physical. This is fixed earth, so pleasure comes through senses, good food, tasteful surroundings, and owning things that are considerably more expensive than they strictly need to be. Taurus is basically Venus saying, "I like that, and now I would like to sit on it." That sounds weird now I'm saying it out loud. Libra takes the same principle of attraction and points it towards other people. This is cardinal air, concerned with relationships and bringing separate things into balance. Where Taurus wants everything to feel nice, Libra wants everything to look nice. And for everyone to stop arguing. So Venus is perfectly comfortable in both. Taurus gives us somewhere lovely to live, Libra makes sure all the furniture matches. Venus is exalted in Pisces, so this is mutable water, imaginative, compassionate, and notoriously unconcerned with where one thing ends and another begins. This allows Venusian attraction to expand beyond just thinking, I want that, and into a much broader sense of connection. It's love with the edges taken off. Venus is in detriment in Aries and Scorpio, the two signs ruled traditionally by Mars, and we've already seen why those two planets can rub each other up the wrong way. And occasionally the right way. Venus attracts and brings things together. Mars asserts itself and goes after what it wants. So in the signs where Mars is most at home, Venus has to play by somebody else's rules. And finally, Venus falls in Virgo, directly opposite her exaltation in Pisces. Where Venus wants to be attracted to something and enjoy it, Virgo wants to examine it and work out what could be improved. It's difficult to surrender to beauty when you're worrying that the lampshade's wonky. And if you want to know what Venus is doing in your chart, stick around because you'll find Venus through all 12 signs and houses at the end of this video.
Venus in the sky.
Venus is the brightest object in our sky after the sun and the moon, and when she appears in the east before sunrise, she's the morning star, blazing away just before the sun arrives and completely overwhelms her. And this is where things get interesting. The Romans called the morning star Lucifer, which means light bringer. That same image appears in the book of Isaiah, which contains the passage, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning?" and then goes on to say, "I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God." The thing is that Isaiah was actually mocking the king of Babylon, but later Christians interpreted that passage as the fall of Satan. And because the Latin Bible had translated that shining morning star as Lucifer, somewhere along the way, one of the names of Venus became associated with the devil. Never underestimate Christianity's ability to get a crazy amount of mileage out of a dodgy interpretation. In any case, the planet itself is not the most hospitable place to visit. Anyone hoping to drop in on the goddess of beauty is in for a disappointment. The surface is about 465 degrees Celsius, with atmospheric pressure roughly 90 times greater than Earth. It's like an extremely attractive person on Tinder whose profile neglected to mention that they can crush you to the size of a matchbox. This didn't stop the Soviet Union. The Venera program successfully landed probes on Venus, and in 1975, Venera 9 sent back the first photograph from the surface of another planet, just before it was flattened like a pancake. And there it is, thousands of years of poetry, love, beauty and erotic longing, all for a planet of rocks, blistering heat and clouds of sulfuric acid. Really gets you in the mood, doesn't it?
Correspondence Corner.
Time now to dig into those occult associations, kicking off with the tarot. Venus is associated with the Empress, and for once the Golden Dawn Correspondence Department hasn't been smoking crack. The Empress is all about fertility and abundance, surrounded by a lush garden. She takes that Venusian principle of attraction and turns it into something creative. It's even got the symbol of Venus right next to her, proving that sometimes occult symbolism really can just put a massive sign on it. On the Tree of Life, Venus is associated with Netzach, the seventh Sephira, whose name means victory. Netzach sits on the emotional and instinctive side of the tree, opposite Hod, the sphere of intellect and reason. So while Hod wants to analyse something and work out what it means, Netzach has already decided whether it likes it or not. And that brings us straight back to where we started. Venus isn't just romantic love, she's attraction and desire, the force that draws us towards one thing rather than another, usually long before we've figured out why. For planetary magic, Venus naturally lends herself to love and attraction. Green is her colour, copper is her metal, and her gemstones include malachite, rose quartz, amazonite and peridot, all of which are available from Otter Spirit as gemstone jewellery. So if you'd like to wear the love, check out the description for links and discount codes. Anyway, one way to use Venus to attract something, or someone is a honey jar spell. Write down what you want to attract. Add some rose petals and something copper if you've got it. Cover it with honey and seal the jar. Do it on a Friday. Light a green candle and focus your attention on the loving relationship you want to bring into your life. But I cannot stress this enough. Word it carefully. Bring me a tall, dark, handsome stranger sounds wonderfully romantic until Venus sends you a 6'4" bailiff to repossess your car.
Cappy's quest. Cappy's quest. No.
So after several thousand years of sex, war, severed genitals, adultery, Lucifer and a very sticky jar, I think we finally understand Venus. She's the reason we're drawn towards people and things before the sensible part of our brain has had an opportunity to file an objection. We keep coming back to the same simple idea, attraction, what we like, what we value, and the mysterious force that makes us look at something we absolutely do not need and think, yeah, I absolutely need that.
Charming little video, darling. You almost made me sound respectable.
Almost. Now, Venus through all 12 signs and houses is coming up straight after this, so if you want to see what this dangerous woman is doing in your chart, don't go anywhere. But first, and since we've spent the last 20 minutes discussing value and pleasure, this seems like a good time to put our wonderful members' names on the screen and say a huge thank you for keeping the lights on at Kippy Towers. If you'd like to join them and get monthly tarot readings, magic tutorials and early access, please click the link in the description. So perhaps the real lesson of Venus is simply this: enjoy beautiful things, love recklessly enough to make life interesting, and try not to start a war over someone else's partner.
Now stop analysing love and go ruin your life properly.
Now that we know what Venus represents, let's see what she actually does in your birth chart. The sign tells us how Venus loves, what she finds beautiful, and how she goes about getting what she wants. The house tells us where romance, pleasure and temptation are most likely to make their grand entrance. So let's dim the lights, pour something expensive and see what happens when the goddess of love is handed 12 different ways to seduce and 12 different houses to do it in. Kicking off with Aries, where Venus is in detriment. This is where the planet of love has spotted someone across the room and decided subtlety is a waste of valuable time. Here Venus expresses herself through passion, pursuit and the thrill of wanting something right now. If you've got Venus in Aries, you may be bold in love, quick to show interest and attracted to people who are confident, exciting and slightly difficult to catch. At its best, this is honest, passionate and refreshingly free of mind games, but it can become impatient or lose interest once the chase is over.
Anticipation is half the pleasure.
Can we anticipate more quickly, please? Next comes Taurus, where Venus is at home. This is the planet of love settling into silk sheets, ordering dessert and refusing to be rushed by anyone. Here Venus expresses herself through sensuality, loyalty and the pleasure of taking her sweet time. If you've got Venus in Taurus, you may show affection through touch, consistency and making life feel a little more beautiful. At its best, this is warm, devoted and deeply appreciative of everything the senses have to offer, but it can become possessive or overly attached to comfort.
Let's go somewhere a little more private.
Will there be cushions? Next comes Gemini, where Venus falls in love through conversation. This is the planet of attraction, armed with 3 anecdotes, 6 questions, and absolutely no awkward silences. Here Venus expresses herself through curiosity, humour, and the thrill of discovering how someone's mind works. If you've got Venus in Gemini, you may be drawn to clever people, playful banter, and relationships that always give you something new to talk about. At its best, this is charming, adaptable, and endlessly interesting, but it can become restless, emotionally elusive, or lose interest the moment a connection starts feeling too predictable.
Tell me something you've never told anyone.
Which version of me are you asking? Next comes Cancer, where Venus wants to be loved, fed, and reassured that nobody is going anywhere. This is the planet of attraction expressing herself through tenderness, emotional closeness, and the comfort of feeling completely at home with someone. If you've got Venus in Cancer, you may show affection by nurturing, remembering the little things, and creating a relationship that feels safe enough to take your shell off.
At its best, this is caring, devoted, and deeply intuitive about the needs of others, but it can become clingy, overly protective, or hold on to feelings long after everyone else thought the matter was settled.
You make it very difficult to leave.
That's the idea. Next comes Leo, where Venus wants romance with lighting, costumes, and a standing ovation. This is the planet of love expressing herself through warmth, generosity, and the desire to make affection feel like an event. If you've got Venus in Leo, you may love boldly, flirt dramatically, and want a relationship you can be proud of. At its best, this is loyal, passionate, and wonderfully generous with praise, but it can become demanding, overly concerned with attention, or start treating every minor disappointment like the closing scene of a tragic opera.
You do like to be adored, don't you?
No, I just like people with good judgment.
Next comes Virgo, where Venus is in full, and Virgo has put the love letters in alphabetical order. Here, the planet of affection expresses herself through thoughtfulness, usefulness, and noticing the tiny details nobody else sees. If you've got Venus in Virgo, you may show love by helping, fixing, and quietly making things easier for the people you care about. At its best, this is devoted, considerate, and wonderfully attentive, but it can become overly critical, uncomfortable receiving affection, or so busy looking for what could be improved that it forgets to enjoy what's already there.
Let's just lose ourselves in the moment.
Okay, I've scheduled that for 7:30.
Next comes Libra, where Venus is at home. This is the planet of love in her natural habitat, surrounded by candlelight, good manners, and people pretending not to notice the sexual tension. Here, Venus expresses herself through charm, partnership, and the desire to create harmony. If you've got Venus in Libra, you may be romantic, socially graceful, and deeply drawn to relationships that feel balanced. At its best, this is affectionate, diplomatic, and wonderfully skilled at making another person feel desired, but it can become indecisive, overly dependent on approval, or so determined to keep the peace that it avoids saying what it actually wants.
Tell me what you desire.
What are you having? Next comes Scorpio, where Venus is in detriment. This is the planet of love stepping into a darkened room, locking the door, and asking whether you're prepared to mean every word you say. Here, Venus expresses herself through intensity, loyalty, and the desire to know another person completely. If you've got Venus in Scorpio, you may be magnetic, deeply passionate, and unwilling to settle for anything that feels superficial. At its best, this is devoted and emotionally courageous, but it can become jealous, possessive, or so afraid of betrayal that it starts testing a relationship before anything has actually gone wrong.
You're looking at me as though you know all my secrets.
Not all of them.
Next comes Sagittarius, where Venus wants romance to come with a passport, a good story, and absolutely no discussion of settling down too quickly. Here, the planet of love expresses herself through adventure, humour, and the excitement of discovering something new together. If you've got Venus in Sagittarius, you may be drawn to confident, open-minded people and relationships that leave plenty of room to breathe. At its best, this is warm, generous, and refreshingly honest about what it wants, but it can become restless, avoid emotional responsibility, or keep chasing the next possibility before giving the current one a chance to deepen.
Where exactly are you taking me?
I'll tell you when we get there.
Next comes Capricorn, where Venus treats romance less like a whirlwind and more like a long-term investment. Here, the planet of love expresses herself through loyalty, commitment, and the quiet confidence of proving affection over time. If you've got Venus in Capricorn, you may be drawn to capable, dependable people and relationships that have real staying power. At its best, this is devoted, mature, and willing to build something lasting. But it can become guarded, overly cautious, or so focused on whether a relationship has a future that it forgets to enjoy the present.
Are you ever going to let your guard down?
After the probationary period.
Next comes Aquarius, where Venus wants a lover, a best friend, and enough personal space to remain an interesting person. Here, the planet of love expresses herself through friendship, individuality, and attraction to people who refuse to be ordinary. If you've got Venus in Aquarius, you may be drawn to unusual minds, unconventional relationships, and connections built on shared ideas rather than traditional expectations. At its best, this is open-minded, loyal, and refreshingly accepting of people exactly as they are, but it can become emotionally detached, contrary for the sake of it, or so determined to stay independent that nobody is quite sure whether they're actually in a relationship.
I can never tell what you're feeling.
Neither can I. Exciting, isn't it?
Finally comes Pisces, where Venus is exalted. This is the planet of love, holding on to the dangerous belief that soulmates are hiding everywhere. Here, Venus expresses herself through compassion, imagination, and the longing to dissolve every boundary between two people. If you've got Venus in Pisces, you may be deeply romantic, emotionally intuitive, and drawn to connections that feel spiritual, poetic, or slightly impossible. At its best, this is tender, forgiving, and capable of loving with extraordinary depth. But it can become idealistic, self-sacrificing, or fall in love with someone's potential while politely ignoring everything they're actually doing.
What do you see when you look at me?
Everything I've ever wanted.
Now let's put Venus in the first house. This is the front door of the chart, your appearance, presence, and the impression you make before anyone has worked out who you actually are. With Venus here, charm tends to be very visible. You may come across as attractive, graceful, or naturally easy to like, even when you're just looking for the toilets. This can become overly concerned with appearance or dependent on approval, but at its best this is warmth, magnetism, and the ability to make people feel drawn to you before you've even said a word.
Let them look. Beauty was never meant to hide.
The second house is the treasure chest of the chart. Money, personal values, and the things that help you feel secure. With Venus here, pleasure and self-worth can become closely tied to what you own and surround yourself with. This can become materialistic, overly indulgent, or tempted to spend money simply because something is beautiful and life is short. But at its best, this brings a strong sense of value, a talent for attracting resources, and the ability to create a life that feels both comfortable and genuinely worth enjoying.
Never apologize for wanting nice things.
The third house is the conversation corner of the chart. Communication, learning, everyday encounters, and the way you connect with the world around you. With Venus here, charm tends to come through the voice, the words, and the ability to make even ordinary conversation feel a little more intimate. This can become flirtatious without meaning to be, overly concerned with saying the right thing, or so fond of pleasant conversation that difficult subjects never quite get mentioned. But at its best, this is wit, diplomacy, and a gift for making people feel understood, entertained, and very glad they started talking to you.
A good conversation should always leave them wanting more.
The fourth house is the home of the chart, family, roots, and emotional foundations. With Venus here, love is often tied to comfort, familiarity, and the feeling of being safe with someone. It can become overly attached to the past, reluctant to disturb the peace, or so determined to keep everyone comfortable that difficult feelings get tucked under the furniture. But at its best, this is tenderness, loyalty, and a gift for creating a home where people feel genuinely loved.
Make your home the place they never want to leave.
The fifth house is the pleasure beach of the chart. Romance, creativity, play, and the things you do simply because they make you feel alive. With Venus here, love tends to arrive with flirting, theatre, and a strong desire to be swept off your feet. This can become addicted to attention, or more interested in the thrill of romance than the reality of a relationship. But at its best, this is joyful, expressive, and irresistibly affectionate, with a gift for making love feel exciting, beautiful, and worth celebrating.
Flirt shamelessly. Life is terribly brief.
The sixth house is the workshop of the chart. Daily routines, work, service, health, and all the small responsibilities that keep life from falling apart. With Venus here, affection often shows up through usefulness, cooperation, and quietly making somebody's day easier. This can become people-pleasing, overly accommodating, or so busy proving love through effort that it forgets to ask whether the effort is being returned. But at its best, this is kindness in action, graceful teamwork, and the ability to bring warmth and beauty into even the most ordinary parts of life.
Love is often hiding in the little things.
The seventh house is the partnership room of the chart. Committed relationships, close bonds, and the people you choose to meet as equals. With Venus here, love and companionship can become central to how you understand yourself. This can become overly dependent on relationships and reluctant to be alone, but at its best this is romantic, cooperative, and deeply gifted at creating partnerships built on affection, fairness, and mutual respect.
Love is at its finest when both people choose it.
The 8th house is the locked room of the chart. Intimacy, secrets, power, and the kind of connection that changes you, whether you wanted it to or not. With Venus here, love is rarely casual. Attraction can become bound up with trust, vulnerability, and the desire to merge completely with another person. This can become possessive, financially entangled, or drawn to relationships that feel intense simply because intensity feels meaningful. But at its best, this is profound loyalty, emotional courage, and the ability to create bonds that survive honesty, crisis, and transformation.
Real intimacy is what happens when people stop pretending.
The 9th house is the open road of the chart. Travel, belief, higher learning, and the search for experiences that make life feel bigger. With Venus here, attraction can be tied to adventure, different cultures, big ideas, and people who open up an entirely new world. This can become restless, idealize someone simply because they're exotic or unavailable, or treat romance as another experience to collect before moving on. But at its best, this is generous, curious, and open-hearted, with a gift for finding love through discovery and growing alongside the people it chooses.
Fall in love with someone who shows you a world you haven't seen.
The 10th house is the public stage of the chart. Career, reputation, ambition, and the version of you the wider world gets to see. With Venus here, charm, beauty, or social grace can become part of how you build success and recognition. This can become overly concerned with appearances, tempted to use relationships for status, or so focused on being admired that genuine affection starts feeling like another achievement. But at its best, this brings diplomacy, popularity, and a natural ability to attract support, opportunities, and people who want to see you succeed.
Never underestimate the power of being remembered fondly.
The 11th house is the social circle of the chart. Friendship, community, shared ideals, and the people who help you imagine a better future. With Venus here, affection often begins with friendship, common interests, and the pleasure of feeling accepted by a group. This can become overly dependent on social approval, blur the line between friendship and romance, or keep things safely casual to avoid risking a wider connection. But at its best, this is open-hearted, inclusive, and gifted at bringing people together through warmth, charm, and a genuine appreciation of what makes each person different.
The best love stories often begin with friendship.
Finally, the 12th house is the hidden chamber of the chart. Dreams, solitude, the unconscious, and everything we feel before we know how to explain it. With Venus here, love can become private, idealized, or difficult to separate from fantasy. This can mean secret relationships, unavailable partners, or falling for the idea of someone while ignoring who they actually are. But at its best, this is compassionate, imaginative, and deeply intuitive, with the ability to love beyond appearances and find beauty in the places other people overlook.
Sometimes love is felt long before it can be understood.
And that is Venus through all 12 signs and houses, goddess of love, planet of pleasure, and the reason good judgment disappears the moment someone attractive walks into the room. Join us next time when we'll be looking at Mercury, planet of communication, clever ideas, and hogging the talking stick. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.